All right, hello everybody. All right, we're bouncing a little bit there. There were some technical difficulties, so I want to see if things are working correctly. Let's see. I think is it good? Oh, hey Barb, how you doing? Is the sound coming through and is the video looking right? I did have some technical difficulties, so I just want to do a quick check to make sure that things are doing okay. Hearing looks good. Okay, perfect. All right, so today's going to be a little bit different of a talk, as you can probably tell by the title. I've, as with everybody around the world at this point, in light of the Charlie Kirk situation, has been doing a lot of reflection. I know I certainly have, thinking about this, looking at the response, seeing how many people are going to church, how many people are reading their Bibles, picking things up after having decades maybe of not even ever looking at the Bible. I mean, it really has been amazing, the amount of evangelism that's gone on as a result of this. He truly was a martyr. And we're seeing the fruits of that. We're seeing the fruits of martyrdom, which is that the gospel grows forth, the kingdom grows. But I thought, do I have anything that I could add to the conversation? Do I have anything that would be worth talking about? Because I have had a lot of thoughts, some of which I may share tonight, some of which I may not, because there's a ton of other people on the internet already talking about this. And I thought, well, there is one thing that I think uniquely I might be able to provide on this situation. And that is this, is that, and a couple of other guys have mentioned this too, I've seen this in some of the other big YouTube guys or big political kind of people, is 10 years prior to Charlie Kirk, they had been going out on campuses. And funny enough, I thought to myself, I was like, oh, so did I. So I've done college talks for about 2 decades. And I did a lot more of it in my 20s and early 30s. I don't do as much of it now, but I still do get out there and do some. But during my 20s and early 30s, I don't even know how many. I think when we looked at the number of colleges I'd gone to, I think it was probably like 50 some colleges, I would say, many multiple times. So I got to do this, and we would have conversations, for example, about homosexuality issues and transgenderism. We'd have conversations about abortion, where I'd do a talk and we'd have conversations. I've done many at high schools, and we've been to over 36 to 40 high schools and middle schools, talking about the same things. A lot of my talks ended up being campus ministry talks as well, where we would go and I would share the gospel at everyone, or maybe sometimes I would talk about apologetics. I did a lot of apologetics, so we'd talk about creation evolution. That was a big one. I did a lot of creation evolution talks. So I kind of hit on all of these different issues. I did talks on finding meaning and significance in life. So I did very much outreach type talks and shared the gospel. And I wanted to kind of take an evening, just a little bit of time here, and kind of reflect on this. I want to talk about some of the trends that I've seen over the course of the last 20 years. And then I want to finish by talking about, a little bit about how wokeism specifically has impacted this situation and the ability to even conduct talks. But also I want to talk about going forward and provide some thoughts and some advice because a lot of people that are wanting to get into this now, get into going out and doing talks. And I want to kind of just provide, here's 20 years of experience doing this. Here are some of my thoughts for those who are interested, maybe getting out there and actually going out and saying, hey, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go and engage people on campus. So to start it off, I just want to go back to the beginning. How did I get into it? Well, I got into going to campus from campus. In other words, I was in college at Illinois Wesleyan University, and I saw people walking away from Christianity, and their reasons were religion courses, where they said, well, all religions are really the same. So after taking some religion courses, they either didn't have faith in the Bible anymore, they felt like the Bible is full of mistakes, very much, more we'll call it concrete apologetics or evidentialist apologetics issues. And they said, well, my professor, super smart, said the Bible's a bunch of baloney, so now that's what I believe. I saw people leaving Christianity due to philosophy. In other words, something in philosophy had convinced people to leave Christianity. And I also saw people leave due to biology courses. In other words, evolution. And so I saw those, the Bible, philosophy, and evolution, thinking and evolution. It's kind of the 3 of the big reasons why people were leaving faith in college. Now, nowadays it's changed even. Now it's the sexuality issues, it's the transgenderism, it's the homosexuality issues, it's a slew of other things, right? It's literally socialism versus capitalism, or all of that kind of stuff. There's a lot more now, but this was back 20 years ago when I was in college. And I remember saying, God, if you give me the answers, I will go out and share them. And that really what it was. It was just a simple prayer. It was a simple prayer. It was a prayer where I just prayed and I said, you know what, God, I would love the answers to some of these questions that I have. Because again, I had not heard the answers myself. There wasn't a whole lot of apologetics back then, not like now where it's just everywhere. There really wasn't a whole lot back then. You had to go to specific sources to even get your hands on information. And we were just so hungry for it. And I said, if I get the information, I'll go out. And I wasn't trying to be, and I wasn't trying to be anybody famous. I was just simply a guy trying to go out and share the truth. That's really all it was about. And so I did. And I just jumped in. And my first piece of encouragement, I would say maybe to anybody who's interested, would be to do just that. Just jump in. Now, you have to have a couple of things in place. And we'll talk about this, the struggles and the difficulties. The best way to jump in is be hyper-specific. Don't try and go after a ton of different things. Have a single conversation on a single topic and read as much as you can about that single topic. And then have a conversation about that topic. Keeping it small and keeping it simple, keeping it very focused is really important because there's so much information out there. And I'll say this. This is actually one of the struggles that I had over when I was doing this a lot. And remember, I was doing this while working a job too. This wasn't like my full-time job by any stretch. This was something I did for free on the side. And I was just spending my evenings going out and doing this kind of stuff. The hardest thing about it, I think, was reading enough to feel as though I knew enough to be able to talk on this effectively and accurately, and also to be able to address any questions or issues or things that may come up. And for anyone who's done debates or public speaking in the issue of creation and evolution, you'll know that this is very hard because you cannot even read a fraction of the articles out there. There's just no way. So what do you have to do? You have to read enough to know the kinds of things people say, the kinds of things people try to prove, and you've got to know at least the basics well enough that no matter what more detailed technical issue might come along, you're able to reframe it in a more basic way that can then be easily addressed or quickly addressed. So that was always a struggle, especially again with creation evolution. That was always a struggle, right? It was just being current. And I would remember probably every year that I did it for a solid 10 years, I'd have to go back and just look and see what were the new things being said that year. You know, both from the apologetics perspective and otherwise. What were the responses, though, that I would get to some of these talks? Well, let me tell you, even before the current climate, you know, that's led to some of the more recent issues, it was not good back then. So we go back, even to when I first started and went to these campuses, and there weren't a whole lot of apologists, there weren't a whole lot of people going out and doing this. So you'd have people that would come, and people tended to be pretty civil in general. This is, again, 20 years ago. They tended to be pretty civil. At that point, colleges were still a liberal stronghold. So, I mean, did you have a lot of conservatives on college? No. I mean, it was practically empty at most of the colleges that I went to. You know, the campus ministries would be very small. The conservative attendance would be very small. I mean, it was still predominantly dominated by the left or by anti-Christian sentiment. But you did at least have a more congeniality. Now, as time went on, I began to realize that this was declining. Specifically, and this is one of the trends I wanted to mention, what was declining was people's willingness to have conversations or even allow the other side to be heard. That I saw probably start to get really hot about 10 years into doing public speaking of this kind, and I saw that that was a trend, and it was increasingly more distressing. What I found was that less and less people from the other side would attend talks over time, although they still did. And actually, I'll even share some more recent ones that were actually very positive. But the other thing that happened is you'd start to see an extremism. Now, there was one time where I went to University of North Carolina, Charlotte, okay? And I was working at a campus with the campus ministry there, and we did a talk on creation. And I had done just the standard kind of things, talking about, the different types of problems that one can have. For example, a lot of people get on Christianity about the, quote, starlight problem. Well, how could, light travel from the stars to the earth if the earth is only 6,000 years old? And, the problem actually is that we actually have an answer. In Christianity, we have an answer. We say that, well, God stretched out the heavens and created these stars as mature. The secularists actually have a bigger issue. the universe is very large and it actually outstrips the, quote, age of the universe. So actually, they would have the problem of light actually doesn't have enough time to reach the Earth also, and it's called the horizon problem. If you're curious, you can look that up. So I talked about this, and afterward, I'll say this, after the event that I'm about to mention, a student came up and said, man, that professor really, he was furious at you. And I said, and we'll talk about what I mean in this, I'm skipping ahead in the story. And he said, what did you say? And I told him what I said. He's like, well, he would agree with all that. And I said, yeah, but I said God created the universe. He said, oh, well, that's why I was angry. In other words, this graduate student told me, I hadn't said anything that modern day scientists didn't know. I hadn't given any data they didn't know. In fact, I only basically told the truth. I just attributed it to God and not to nature. In other words, this professor, and I'm going to tell you what he did in a second, what both of these guys did in a second, they didn't disagree with me because of science. They disagreed with me philosophically and theologically. And they were angry. So what happened? I finished my talk, first professor got up, and I'll say this, it felt like he was talking for 15 minutes. I don't actually know how long he was talking. It was at least 5, maybe 7 or 8 minutes that he was just allowed to have the mic, which again, I never let that happen anymore. Once somebody's doing that, I have somebody come up and take the mic away, because what he basically did was get up and call me names and slander me for a solid 8 minutes. He didn't address a single argument. He didn't address a single fact, not a single thing. He just said I was a horrible person, and I was spreading lies, and I was deceiving people, and I was anti-science, and all of these kinds of things. That's all he was saying. And that kind of thing is very common when you get into that. And then another professor stood up and said very similar things and just kind of talked. And when I got the mic back, I simply said, look, that's your opinion, great, but I wanted to point out that you didn't actually address a single argument I brought up. Everything I've stood still stands, and I do believe, rightly so, that God created the universe. Now, that kind of response, I was getting that kind of response 15 years ago. I think that would have been about 15 years ago that happened. I've had responses as well, for example, on the sexuality issues, where literally I just simply got up and simply shared what the Bible said about it. And I also shared, in actually a very neutral way, oddly enough. And this was actually at UNC Chapel Hill. And I shared the biological ramifications of engaging in some of those activities. The diseases that could happen, the death rates, the mortality rates from some articles and things. And literally, I was fired from a pastoral position, and that talk was one of the reasons why. So in other words, I now encountered a new type of persecution, not one that came from the other side, but one that came from within. It came from pastors and people at churches who didn't want to offend. They didn't want to cause people distress. They understood that the truth could cause distress, could offend people, and they were scared to death of doing that. And so I lost a pastoring position, and there was other things as well, but that was one of the main things. Same church. I also essentially was censored over stating that yoga was bad. That Christian yoga is not a real thing. It's just yoga, and it's not good. And I was also censored over calling out the New Apostolic Reformation and Bethel Church and things like that as not good things, as New Age occultism. So again, I'll take it. I'll take my hits at this point. And that was over a decade. It was probably a decade ago at this point. But the point is now I was seeing, oh, okay, it's not just the other side. Now it's like the book we had just done, Stockholm Syndrome Christianity. Now the church is attacking people who are trying to tell the truth. The church is putting people down who are trying to tell the truth. I mean, I even had pastors recently say things like, well, there's certain things we don't talk about because if we do, well, that might offend people. So this is some pretty big stuff that we're getting into here. And so not only was I getting hit on the side of the campuses and having people try and attack me in there, much like people have today, I was also getting hit from the church side. And so be prepared. Here's my next piece of advice for everybody. Be prepared. It's not just the left that'll come after you. It could be your own church. The bottom line is when you stand up for truth, it doesn't matter where it is. Evil hiding in any sector fights you. And the enemy will use friends and foes alike to deal those blows. And so, again, as we're looking at how things have changed, I began to see, in the beginning, it was mainly the other side, and then it starts to transition to even Christians are arguing against this stuff. Now, what have I seen going even further forward? I've seen Christians who were solid Bible-believing Christians who were both left and right, and I've seen them walk over completely to socialism. I've seen them walk over to completely to wokeism. I've seen them walk from pro-life to full-on abortionists. I've seen all of these shifts where people who either didn't stand for the truth or didn't think it was important or didn't want to learn ended up embodying the other side, the side of evil, the side of death, the side of destroying free speech. And I watched as many friends did this. I've watched that over the last 10 years. I've seen that happen. And this is kind of the interesting thing. My comment then would be this. As you go out, you need community. You need to be around people and supported by people who are in agreement with what you're doing. Because unfortunately, some of us have had to go it alone. And that is very, very difficult. And so as you do this, and this is why I'm very excited people want to start groups of people doing this stuff, because we didn't really have much of a choice. We had to just do this stuff, and sometimes we were very much alone. Go to anybody you see. Maybe you're not going to be the one to go out and speak, but to anybody you see who's doing this, go up to them, shake their hand, tell them thank you for getting out there and doing this. This is hard work. What Charlie Kirk and many others have done throughout the last 2 decades, this is difficult. It is emotionally taxing. It is spiritually taxing. It can be isolating at times. All of these types of things. Anybody who's willing to go out and speak the truth on a campus like this, we need to support those people. We need to say, you know what? Even if we don't agree on everything, we need to say thank you for at least being out here and trying and doing something. Because it was people like that that paved the way for giants like Charlie Kirk to do what he did. You know, it's the people that went out there 20, 30, 40 years ago, even before me. I mean, I was even inspired by seeing other people do it. I'll be honest. I was inspired by Frank Turek. I don't agree with him on a lot of theology. It's fine. But I still love his apologetics, and I was still inspired by him when I saw him go out and do this stuff. And he's one of the reasons why I got into it. So this is the thing. It's this long tradition. I mean, we can go all the way back. We can go all the way back to Stephen the Martyr. We can go back to Paul in the Areopagus. We can go back to all of these, even back to the biblical times, and say these are the people that inspired us to do these things. And so I would like to simply say that it is important to have community, to recognize that we're not alone, to recognize that we are part of a larger movement, the Church of God, that we're part of the bride of Christ, that when we go out and share the gospel, when we go out and speak about these morality issues, when we go out and essentially try and shine some light into the vast darkness that is this world, that we do not stand alone, that we stand with many other people. We stand in a long tradition of people who've done this, people who've been persecuted to varying degrees, some verbal insults like myself, some had to pay with their lives. And that's what I'm talking about throughout all of history now. And the bottom line is even if we don't all join in, which I know there's a lot of people joining right now, we can start supporting people. Just moral support, encouragement, I mean, you name it. Find these people where they're doing this and encourage the stuffing out of them because they'll appreciate it, I guarantee. I know certain times where I had encouragement when I was doing this stuff, and it was always very, very appreciated. I really was. Because let me tell you, when you put yourself out there, watch out. It can be very intense. The response can be intense. But I want to share one positive story. I actually went to a school. This was about 5 years ago. I went to a school. I don't know if I've talked about this story much. And this was a school. It was, oh gosh. Actually, I probably better not say the school name just for various reasons. But I went to a school in North Carolina. We'll leave it at that. And there was probably, oh gosh, I was doing a talk. And the talk was, I think the talk was a creation evolution talk, I think. But I don't know if somebody had asked a question. It's been a couple years now. If somebody asked a question, but anyway, the topic of homosexuality came up, okay? And there were 2 students present. And again, when I did these talks, these were mostly non-Christians, by the way. In these talks, these schools, mostly non-Christians. There was always a couple of Christians there, but mostly non-Christians. And there were 2 lesbian girls there. And they were in high school. and they were there, and they had asked me, I can't remember, again, we had got on this topic. They might have asked me directly. I can't remember exactly how it was, but we had gotten onto it about homosexuality. I had said, well, the Bible considers it a sin. I said, I would consider it a sin. The Word of God does. I understand that not everybody agrees with that, but this is what the truth says, and here are some reasons why this is not a good thing to engage in. And I had a conversation with these two lesbian girls, and literally, I think it was in the middle of the talk when they finished saying what they were going to say, they actually said, you know, thank you for getting up and sharing. And they even said, you don't hate us at all. I said, no, I don't. I said, I love you guys. That's why I'm here. I'm here because I want to help. I'm here because I want to engage. They want to talk to you. And they actually had a very positive reaction, a very positive reaction to what I had said, even though we disagreed. And it was a very pleasant conversation. There was no yelling or fighting or arguing or anything. And I thought to myself, this is how it should be. This is how it should be. It should be that we can have a conversation with each other and not feel like it's an existential threat against our lives. And these two lesbian girls clearly felt that. They felt no threat from me whatsoever, even though I disagreed with them. I was very friendly, very congenial, and I had, honestly, very nice conversation in front of a large group of people. And we had a great time. Now, who in that group, though, was vitriolic and very upset? The two biology teachers. They were furious. They were very, 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 very angry. And I asked them to engage. I said, could you critique any of the science I've taught today? Go ahead, pick anything out. If you disagree, if you think I've represented the science wrong. And here's the thing, they couldn't. They just said, well, you're a creationist. And then they eventually left. But they couldn't actually critique any of it. And that's the thing. You can tell who's being ideological and who's actually willing to engage in the conversation when, one, people are really about the truth. You can tell because they're actually willing to talk. But two, when they can't engage because they know they're wrong, they know they've been beat in some sense. They know that they don't have a defense. And then the comment is not, I'll think about that at least. You've given me some food for thought. I've had so many people come and tell me, hey, you've given me something to think about. But instead their answer is simply, well, you're a creationist, you're a Bible believer, so you're anti-science, and now I'm just leaving. And it's like, look, in that talk, I don't even know that I necessarily even brought up the Bible. I just shared scientific facts. That's all I did. And just showed how the data is pointing toward creationism. It's kind of a funny thing. But I've seen this. Aw, thank you. Thank you for saying that. I appreciate that. Yeah, I like I said, I wanted to talk about the Charlie Kirk situation, but I wanted to provide something that was unique, not just adding to kind of the things that a lot of people are saying. There's a lot of people that are talking about and doing a good job doing it. But I thought, by reflecting on actually how these things go, like this is what Charlie Kirk did. He literally went around and did this type of stuff. I'm sure he had the same things. I'm sure there were times where he was like, man, do I know everything? Especially when he started out, how are my debate tactics? Like, am I good at this yet? I mean, you deal with a lot of these struggles. It's a very stressful thing to do this. It's not easy. It takes a lot of courage, and it can be very difficult at times. And so, these are just, again, some of the stories that I've had in my experiences of doing this for 20 years now. I went to a more recent one. This was within the last year. And I went to a UNC Chapel Hill, did a talk on creation evolution. Most of the people there, I think, were old Earth or evolutionists or theistic evolutionists. I don't know if there were any seven-day creation people there. There might have been one or two. But it was funny. I did it at UNC. And the nice thing was, I was actually kind of expecting, okay, this could be a hot thing. And it actually wasn't. I was actually pleasantly surprised. I had some very good conversations with people, most of whom disagreed with me. But they all said, yeah, I can't really argue with any of your lines of reasoning. Like, your lines of reasoning are solid. I've just never heard this stuff. And that's kind of my point. My point is that when we go out there and do these talks, the thought is, well, I'm sure everybody already knows this. Actually, they don't. I just did a creation tour today at the Downtown Museum in Raleigh, and I had moms coming up to me who are creationists who said, I've just never heard any of this science before. When we go out and do talks, there's a reason why we do this. There's a reason why I'm excited that people are going to do this, because people really don't know. And it's when you finally hear the truth for the first time that you can say, oh my goodness, what I believe is actually backed up by reality, and it's very cool when that happens. And so I go out and share things. I do it for the people who already believe, because it just reinforces their belief. Excuse me, let me grab a drink of water here real quick. I do it so that people who haven't heard have some new information. Maybe they can learn something new. I do it to change people's minds. Again, I'm not trying to force a mind to be changed, but I'm just offering them information that maybe they haven't considered. And I do it, and I'll say this, it is an act of love every single time somebody goes out there and tries and does this. And I would say that's another reason why I did it. Why? Because I genuinely do care about people in general, no matter what they believe, think, or do. I genuinely care that they hear the truth because God cared about me as a sinner, as a person who has sinned and done wrong. He cared about me even in the midst of my sin to get me the gospel, to save me. And so that's the piece that I think the other side doesn't get. They look at it, even Christians I think don't get this. They look at it and say, oh, they'll be offended. Or they look at it and say, oh, you're going to turn people off Christianity. It's like, no, 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 no. I'm sharing this hard information because I care. Because I love people. And I can say this, that's why Charlie Kirk went out and did what he did. Just by watching his videos, because I was watching, I remember when that happened, I was watching one of his videos, I think that morning. I was basically watching one, and then I heard this happen. My friend called me and told me, and it was, I mean, I was devastated. And to be quite honest, there's a reason why I've waited as long as I have before even doing a talk, and it's because emotionally processing this was hard, because he is somebody I viewed very much as in a camaraderie. I did not know him personally, but I viewed him as a camaraderie. I'm like, he's going out and doing this. I was so thankful that he was doing this stuff, because I don't have as much time anymore to do it as I did when I was in my 20s and early 30s, where I was doing it multiple times a week at times. Now I just don't have as many opportunities for a variety of reasons, but I still do get out there and do it on occasion. And so I was just very thankful, and that's why it hit so hard when this happened. But then I saw the outpouring, and I'm like, my goodness, this is a worldwide event. And so I want to talk a little bit about that aspect of it too, that it is a worldwide event. I'll say it like this. People do not go back to church, suddenly start signing, reading their Bibles en masse, just because a person died, okay? Just because a beloved person died. The Bible specifically talks about, it says, when somebody is martyred, the blood of the martyrs is going to essentially cause a gospel revolution, essentially, or a revival. And I think we are in the midst of a form of revival, an actual real revival. Now, what do I mean by revival? I simply mean this. People repenting, turning back to God. That's all it is. I don't buy into the modern day notions of ecstatic revivals or emotional, sensationalist revivals. No, what real revivals are people saying, you know what? I need to start going to church again. You know what? I need to start reading my Bible again. You know what? I was against God, but I think I got to give this another chance. That's evidence of a real revival. And it's on a worldwide scale. We're seeing millions of people doing this. It's wild. It's absolutely wild. And so there's a reality that God is using this event to bring people to him, to bring people to Jesus. And I couldn't be more happy that that is the outcome of this, because evil thinks it wins when it silences people. Evil thinks it wins when it kills people. Evil thinks it wins when it wins a court battle. Like, oh yeah, we won the court battle. Doesn't matter. That's irrelevant. Oh man, we got this guy. Irrelevant. Oh man, we silenced that pastor. Irrelevant. The types of persecution that have happened to me personally over the course of the last 10 years, and I'll be the first to say this, I am not perfect. I did not always respond perfectly. There are a lot of things that I caused to happen on my own self, and that's also a shame. But there's also a lot of real persecution out there as well, similar, that's happened. And I look at it all, and as difficult as things can be at times, I am thankful, and I'll tell you why. Because without that specific series of persecutions and things, I probably wouldn't be taking the stands that I'm taking on the issues that I am, and I probably would not have gotten the information out that I did to the people that I did. There's a reality that when you're in a situation and it's not good, you can say, well, no church is perfect. I guess I'm just going to listen and obey and be obedient and do what I'm going to do. And just, I'll be quiet about certain things. And I'll be honest with you. I understand that sentiment. I don't agree with it, but I understand where that comes from, because we need communities, we need churches, things are flawed. I mean, I get that this is a real struggle for people. Like, well, what do I do? It's like, I can't not have a church. I can't do this kind of thing. So what do I do? How do I respond? My comment is, and this is why I'm always tempered when I say this, my personal comment is, don't be silent. Don't be cowed into silence. Stand up. And if it's truly a God thing, a God-honoring thing, in other words, if you're standing up against occultism, if you're standing up against evil, and your church is against you, and they kick you out, then so be it. Now, that's not a license to just be heretical. But if you're going to sit there and say, I'm taking a stance against abortion, your church says, don't talk about that because that's going to upset people, well, then maybe it is time to find a new church. I'm just also trying to honor the fact that it's a struggle, a psychological, spiritual, emotional struggle to take a stand amongst friends. That is very hard. And so I'm telling you here, I support those who do that. And I try to have compassion when people don't. Because there are some times where I've made decisions and people have not had compassion toward me. And I think that's the one fault on the conservative right side, is there can be a lack of compassion about the real emotional, psychological struggle that people have when dealing with these types of issues, especially from within. So having said that too, I want to go ahead and talk a little bit about the wokeism piece of this, because this is critical theory. It's talk on critical theory. How has critical theory changed the face of all of this? Well, critical theory has essentially tried to silence the conversation. That's the issue. It's painted the Christian right and the Christians in general as the enemy. And it's basically said, if you don't agree with us, you are the enemy, and you deserve what's coming to you. This has kind of been the mainstream left's response to a lot of this stuff. And I've known this for a long time, seen this on the campuses quite often, how people on the campuses, really started to treat Christians as the enemy. And here's the thing, if you actually look back into Marxist theory and you look into socialist theory and things like that, Christianity is the enemy. It's the only real thing that can actually stand against a lot of that stuff. And so in a lot of those documents, you'll find that that is the thing that has to be attacked. What is the primary thing standing against basically progressive, liberal, communistic things? It's Christianity. That's really it. If you remove Christianity, the whole world's going down that path. I mean, that's just where this is headed otherwise. And so it makes sense that Christianity is seen as this force that's opposed to all of those things. Again, they want to take down the family unit. They want to take down traditional understanding of sexuality. They want to take down the understanding of parenting and all of this kind of stuff. And so it makes sense they go after Christianity, because Christianity is going to define all of those things. It's going to say this is how you should do things. The beautiful thing about Christianity is that God literally says, do it or don't do it. That's your own choice, but here is the right way to live. And so, there's that piece of it too. And wokeism is essentially trying to silence things. And I noticed this. I noticed this in the schools. One of the reasons why I don't do schools, the high schools, as much anymore is simply because they shut all the Christian groups down during COVID, and they took years to let them, even some of them, come back online, and most of them never reopened. So we have to understand that there's a strong, strong anti-Christian force in our public school system, where they basically just went roughhouse and just tried to destroy all these Christian groups and never let them come back. I've had teachers that have been persecuted, good friends of mine, be actively persecuted by other Christians in their school and not that they silenced this person, but they basically forced this person into a horrible, horrible situation. They kept persecuting him, saying, you can't do this group, you can't do that, you can't do this. I mean, it was quite awful. He's gone through a lot of persecution. I praise God for him every day, being a hero. We saw, again, how the groups closed and weren't allowed back. We saw how certain talks were not allowed anymore. Teachers, again, were being persecuted. So a lot of this kind of stuff happens in the high schools and middle schools. And then even at the colleges, you're seeing groups, trying to get people kicked out, speakers kicked out. I mean, it's hard to even do this stuff to some extent anymore. And it's only because of certain events that we've been allowed to come back in. And so, I'm looking forward. Maybe I'll be able to get back in and go to some schools a little bit more often again. I hope so. That's one of my kind of thoughts. But that's the effect of critical theory and wokeism, is to silence the conversation, silence the argument, demand obedience above all else. It's not a critical thinking group. Critical theory is very much an ideology. It's very much this is the truth, believe it or else. And so that's one of the other issues with critical theory, is where we're going to talk and seeing the actual effects of it on our college campus, has been the darkening of the college student's mind. And so, talking about 40 minutes, I'll tell you what, I'll just, if anybody would like to ask a question, I will be going to the Zoom afterward for a little bit as well tonight, but I will, if anybody has a question or something they'd like to ask me, I'd be more than happy to share. I hope this was helpful. I hope this honors Charlie Kirk and what he did. I hope it honors just people in general who go out and do these types of college talks. I hope it maybe shared some of the difficulties and real struggles that we have when we do this stuff. It's not easy. And I hope it also gave you some hope in that I have had some really great conversations with you. I've seen people get saved over the years. I've seen all kinds of cool stuff over the years. I've seen kids in the middle of a creation evolution talk ask how to be saved. And I was so in my proving, demonstrating God's creator, that I didn't realize the kid was asking to be saved, and he's sitting here saying, well, no, I need to know how to get saved. And I was like, oh, well, let me tell you that. It was kind of funny. So, there's been so many good things that have happened, and also so many difficult things. It really is the both and when you actually are trying to engage the darkness. All right, well, I'm not seeing any talks pop up, so I'm going to go ahead and open the Zoom link here real quick, and anybody who wants to join in can come and join in, and we can chat here for a little bit. Let me just go ahead and get this ready. Just take me a second here. Remember, stick in the waiting room because I've got to shut everything down before I open it up, or things just start to not talk and they get kind of funky. So give me a second here. This is the church meetings link. So I'm going to start church meeting, start meeting, and I'm starting it. Okay. All right, and I'm going to give the church meetings link if I can get this to do it. There's the link. Okay. I'm going to paste it right here. There's the link. Feel free and join us on Zoom. Again, love to talk to some of you guys. Love to have some fun here and just chat and answer any questions you may have about this or anything else, really. And yeah, looking forward to it. So with that, there's the Zoom link. It should be live. It should be open. Yep, it is. All right. Well, with that, actually, let me see here real quick. Yeah, that I did the right one. I hope I did the right one. If I didn't, I apologize, but I should have given the right link and opened the right thing. All right. Thank you so much for joining us here at Spirit of Truth Church for this talk on critical theory reflections on 2 decades of college talks in light of Charlie Kirk. Lord, we just praise your name, God. We thank you for him. We thank you for his life. We thank you for the lives of all of those others throughout history who have shared the gospel, who have gone to the hard places, gone and talked to people who have been in the trenches. God, we thank you for all of them. In your name we pray, amen. All right, guys, have a great night. Thank you so much for joining us.